Singapore has arguably the strongest economy in the world. Its GDP per capita is 88,734 US dollars, higher than the United States, Canada, Australia, and every other Asian tiger economy. Its government has net zero debt, and it has among the fastest growing economies in the world for 6 decades. Even compared to other Asian tigers, Singapore is remarkable. Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea have all experienced growths faster than Singapore, but Singapore has outpaced them over time, averaging 4% growth for 60 years. This shouldn't have been possible. Singapore is tiny. When Singapore became independent, it was an economic backwater, basically a staging point for goods going on to bigger and better places. Singapore made hardly anything itself. Now, it's an undisputed economic titan, and a haven for multinational corporations looking to operate in the Asian market. So how did this happen? What's behind the most successful economic development project in history? To answer that question, we have to trace the history of Singapore's economic development from the moment it began as an economy. When it became independent, Singapore started with fairly conventional development policies. An approach called import substitution was vogue at the time, implemented everywhere from Peru to Nigeria. The idea was that former colonial states would never be able to develop as long as they imported all manufactured goods from the West. Countries like the United States and Germany would always be able to produce goods more efficiently and cheaply, and companies in places like Singapore wouldn't stand a chance. So developing economies imposed import taxes to create a protected domestic market for their own nascent manufacturing companies. Singapore imposed tariffs in 1962 and 1963 and quotas on goods. By 1965, Singapore had imposed quotas and import licensing on 230 goods. Not only that, but the government set limits on the number of domestic firms that could produce specific goods so that domestic competition wasn't too fierce. This was all designed so that new manufacturing companies could establish themselves with limited foreign competition. But as I said, these policies were common at the time. Nigeria and Argentina didn't turn out nearly as well as Singapore. So what's different? Why do these policies work in Singapore but not elsewhere? The first reason is Singapore's import substitution policies did not involve acquiring tons of debt. When Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico tried to industrialize, they borrowed heavily to fund government spending on infrastructure and investments. This left them with a debt burden that troubled their respective economies for decades. But Singapore's import substitution took the form of import tariffs and government regulations, which actually generated revenue for the state. The second key to Singapore's success is that it didn't stick with import substitution. 5 years after beginning its project, the government pivoted from limiting imports to promoting exports. Exports would be at the heart of Singaporean policy in the 70s. Focusing on the export market is a key step that Singapore shares with other Asian tiger economies like Taiwan and Korea. But that sets it apart from developing economies in Latin America and Africa, which didn't focus on exports to nearly the same extent. But this focus on exporting was absolutely essential for Singapore. The city-state is tiny, and even after it integrated with the Malaysian market, domestic demands for goods simply wasn't high enough to sustain industrialization. Singaporean businesses needed a big enough market for them to achieve efficient scale, and the only way to do this was by exporting. To encourage exports, the government slashed corporate tax rates on manufacturers who prioritized exporting to foreign markets. This led to a massive increase in foreign direct investment into Singapore, which exceeded $2.3 billion between 1968 and 1973. The high rate of investment is in part because Singapore had the raw ingredients for industrial success. It was a port with good transport links to the rest of Asia, low wages, and a government offering tax incentives to productive industries. Another key component of Singapore's development strategy is that the government plays a central role in guiding the economy. This is not a state that stood back and let the free market do its thing. Singapore picked winners and losers, but it chose wisely. The government initially promoted export-oriented companies in labor-intensive industries like textile production. This made sense. Singapore had a problem of chronic underemployment and joblessness. Between 1967 and 1973, Singapore added 147,500 manufacturing jobs. For reference, the population at this point was little over 2 million people. By the early 1970s, Singapore had a labor shortage. The state moved away from offering incentives to labor-intensive manufacturing to higher-end manufacturing that would improve wages over time. The government granted 5-year tax breaks to high-tech industries. Enterprises that were already operating in Singapore were also offered new incentives to upgrade the skill level of their employees, to improve technology level through new investments, and to increase automation. Some of the largest businesses in Singapore are government-linked businesses. The state has a partial ownership of Singapore's largest bank, DBS, Singapore Power, and Singapore Airlines. These differ from state-owned enterprises you might have heard of in China because the government doesn't control them. Instead, it has an ownership stake via its sovereign wealth fund. Investing directly in the private sector allows the state to support industries it considers economically crucial for higher growth. To meet the needs of higher tech industry, the government also invested heavily in improving education standards. Starting in 1960, the government enacted a 5-year education drive that boosted enrollment in primary schools by 33%, secondary schools by 95%, and university enrollment by 70%. The government also set up joint training programs with foreign multinationals operating in Singapore. This provided foreign companies with a constant stream of qualified professionals. So at the same time that it's producing higher tech industries through tax incentives, it's providing a workforce that's able to work in those industries. The result is that Singapore has been able to consistently deliver higher economic growth since 1960 and avoided any recessions until 2001. For me, Singapore is remarkable not just because of its economic performance, but also because it defies the conventional ideological debates in economics. Despite using tax cuts as its primary policy tool, Singapore's government is heavily involved in directing its economy, partly owns some of the largest companies, and provides a level of universal welfare that would make Norway proud. And despite that heavy-handed approach, Singapore topped the Ease of Doing Business Index for 9 years in a row between 2007 and 2016. So it's neither a free market capitalist paradise, nor is it a command economy orchestrated from the center. It's something else entirely. And I think what Singapore's example underlines more than anything is the importance of having an actual targeted plan for economic growth, committing to that path, and following through with incentives and investment. It's not about fighting a battle on all fronts in the economy, trying to fix all the problems at once, but choosing particular industries with high potential to promote.